Alright. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I actually thought it'd be dark right now. It's actually still in daylight, which is really nice. Okay, so I want to welcome you to our first Embrace event for the year. And as you know, it's a women's mental health panel. My name's Juliet, if you don't know me. I'm part of the Embrace Ministry, women's ministry team here, along with Yin, Lauren, and Carrie. And when we say ministry team, for those of you who are not from our church, basically we're volunteers for this women's ministry, and we do it because we love Jesus and we love you. So every woman in the team is passionate about seeing all of you women be all that God created you to be. Alright, so that's why we're doing what we're doing. We're not getting paid for it, so extend us some grace. Alright, so if you've never been here before, actually if you're brave enough, do you want to put your hand up if you've never been to an Embrace event or even to church here as well, some of you? Yeah, an extra warm welcome to you guys. I also want to thank some of the women, I won't name them, who've sponsored some of the women to come tonight. So they've paid for extra people to attend. So we really want to thank you because that's a huge blessing. We're going to have supper at the end, so do hang around and have a chat with us if you've got time. Also, if we do need it at the end, we have some women wearing some white lanyards. We understand that some of the things we talk about might trigger something for people that they want prayer for. So they're not counsellors, but they are prayer teams. So at the end, if you do need that, I will remind you that that's available for you out in the back. Okay. Now, as you can see from the turnout tonight, it's actually bigger than we expected. So yeah. Mental health is a really important area, obviously, that we need to be informed about more and more. It's a very large topic, so we won't, of course, be able to cover everything because it's just not going to be possible tonight, but we're hopefully going to cover what is most relevant to us. So hopefully that's what we'll achieve tonight. We hope that you'll be able to walk away being better informed and with a few tools to walk through the journey with other people, if it's not something that you're going through yourself. But if it is something that you feel like you're not sure you might be going through, that you will be able to take the next steps to get some help or to speak to somebody. So if we can achieve that tonight, then that would be great. We're also not going to claim to know everything. Okay, so we will do our best. We have some really experienced professionals with us tonight that will be on the panel sharing their wisdom. But again, we don't know everything. We're mainly going to focus on anxiety and depression tonight. There's a big scope for mental illness. Jimmy will touch on suicide as well when he speaks, but mainly anxiety and depression today. Alright. Now, at any time during tonight, if you feel like what's being said brings up emotions or you're starting to feel a bit distressed, we do have come cheese sitting in the back row over there, closest to the cafe, and if you do feel like you need to take a breather or you need to sit with someone or talk to someone, please feel free to move to the back row there. She'd be happy to sit with you or talk with you. Or if you need to wander into the cafe back there, have a breath, walk around a bit and rejoin us when you're ready, that's fine as well. Okay, so if there's a bit of movement, just let the ladies through if they need to get up and walk around, okay? Alright, so just one more housekeeping thing, the bathrooms are through this door and down to the left if you need to go. Have you gone? Because it would be good to go before we start. Last chance. Alright. I've been, so I'm okay. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Yin, and she's going to introduce the panel members just before we start.
Hello everyone, it's amazing to see so many people here today. Really, we didn't expect so many. So it definitely shows that it's a huge topic. that's probably very close to each one of the heart. So we've got 3 amazing people who we have prayed about and invited to join us in the panel, and I'm just going to introduce them. So the first, we have Dr. Ann Key, and Ann has been a doctor for more than 10 years in the hospital setting and as a GP, and she's particularly interested in women's health, palliative care, and children. And as a GP, she often has to deal with people with mental illness, and she has learned the skill of tackling the challenge of dealing and referring patients in a holistic manner. Now, Anne is an expert in self-care. And why do I say that? Because Anne has 5 kids. 5 kids. So she's an expert in self-care, and she had 5 kids under the age of 7. No, she wasn't 7. She had 7 kids under the age of 5. 5 kids under the age of 7. I don't remember the names of your kids. 5 kids under the age of 7. Yes. So that shows that she has extremely good self-care, because I wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, so Anne, I often see her strolling into church, very relaxed, and with 5 kids following her behind. So that's definitely a gift. So she enjoys walking with her children. She enjoys good food, coffee, and also cooking for her family and friends. Yes. So next we have Jimmy Yo. So Jimmy is the token male today. He's very lucky. And we've invited him to speak not because of his qualifications, but because of his compassion. I've known Jimmy for about 7 years, and I'm always amazed by his compassion for people, his love for people, and he's always, every time he sees us, he's like, oh, how are you? Are you going well? And he's never ever judgmental. Now, Jimmy has lived in Australia for 30 years and has worked in youth and family services across Melbourne. He was a senior counsellor at Melbourne University and taught counselling and cultural competency at Kingsley Theological College. So he's qualified in social work, and he counsels people of all ages, children, teenagers, adults, married couples. Family therapy, he works youth work, community development, and he's currently got a counselling practice out of City Life Community Care, and he's actually going to provide services to our church soon, starting March, once a week. So we're very blessed to have him. He's also a certified certified instructor in the world-renowned mental health first aid course, which I'll talk about at the end of the night, and there's information on your chairs as well. And he is married. He's married with 2 adult children. Enjoys table tennis, fishing, reading, and socializing. Now we have Meredith Rock. A lot of you probably know Meredith. She is a lady who just oozes love. Every time I see her, she just gives me the biggest hug that just takes away your troubles. Yeah. Meredith is very compassionate. She's a family therapist, and she goes an extra mile to do home visits at times, and I think that's really special, because very often people start struggling in like early parenthood or in a marriage, and they can't get babysitting skills, and she actually makes the effort to go visit people in the house and actually sits with them during dinner and sees how they do life. Meredith is a testimony of God's love as well, and God's healing in her life. And through her own story, she's been able to really bring hope to other people. Now, Meredith is involved, and she volunteers in our church cafe care ministry, which is a really empowering ministry that we have in church that helps a lot of people in the community. She enjoys seeing lives changed and transformed by God. And she's qualified as well, like Jimmy, to counsel all ages, children, teenagers, adults. And she's a developmental educator. She has a master's in counseling and has various degrees in family counseling, aging, and rehabilitation and disability. So I can go on and on about these people, but I will just pass the mic back to, I'll pass the mic to Jimmy, and he's going to give us just an introduction today about mental health.
So my name is Jimmy, and his surname is Yao, as in pain, Yao. My dad, no, sorry. So I'm in pain management, so I'm a counselor into mental health pain management. So this is a new thing for me to be here amongst all women, and I'm new here. Usually when City Life runs a women's ministry event, we have a few men in the kitchen, clearing the dishes, you know. So this is my first thing on my own. So if this was a men's event, we probably won't use embrace. We'll use like high five, you know, a punch or something like that. So it's good. Embrace is a very good word. And so let's get on to it. This mental health is really very much more talked about these days. So you really got to catch on what's happening with mental health. And it's been around for a long time, but we just don't talk about it. And we are beginning to. So I just came back from Singapore, and it's pretty hot over there too, you know, mental health, because what we developed here has gone over there. So the course, mental health first aid, now there's actually a first aid course where people actually learns how to respond to someone with a mental health crisis. So it's gone all over the world now. So this is very exciting. It started in Melbourne. Okay. So as you can see, you might recognize some people up there. Okay. So just as Yin introduced me, I have a practice at City Life Community Care. How many of you know where that is? Yeah. Okay. Good. Yes, we've got a new center over there. And I'm there Monday to Fridays, but Wednesdays I'm likely going to be here if people want to get some counseling. So that's something exciting. So in mental health first aid course, which I run, this is my 11th year running a 54th course. I think there's one coming up in March. It's basically to understand what mental illness is. So people don't understand that, therefore we have a lot of myths, misconceptions, misinformation. And so when you have all those, it just creates a lot of fear and ignorance. So I really want to teach people how to understand and how to help. When you see people are in a crisis, like having suicidal thoughts, knowing how to help them is step by step is really important. But above all is to remove the shame, because people don't talk about it because there's just too much stigma. You know, in the old days people don't talk about mental illness, and these days we are beginning to. Can you hear me over there right here?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So these are some of the people that have been trained in the course. I think a lot of them come from this church. In fact, I was saying to Kim Chi, very busy. I was saying that, having done these courses for Clayton, I know more people here than in my own church. So it's quite a few churches have done this. Maybe Chinese Baptist, Bayside. Okay. And also outside churches, also cities of Cardinia and Casey, Swinburne Secondary College. The first time I read this course outside privately was with a bunch of teachers. So how intimidating is that? They scrutinize everything. And so we have Monash University students and staff. I used to be a senior counselor with Monash for 13 years. So yeah, full time plus my own practice. So I decided to give that up and focus on practice. My kids are big enough to look after themselves, so be a bit easier for me to. And I want to travel a bit to see my mom. She's 95, and so it's good to reconnect with the family. Okay. So the other two courses I run is Safe Talk, which is a suicide awareness program, and also a cultural competency course. Now, where's my timekeeper? Over there? So if I'm kind of the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes, let me know. Just a big thank you to Clayton Church of Christ for hosting this event. Also to Yin and Juliet and people involved in organizing this. But I know they put in a lot of work. Plus Meredith and Ann as well is going to speak tonight, and anyone else who's helped. So what is mental health? So we're looking at the World Health Organization definition, and it's talking about it as a state of being well-being, and knowing one's abilities and being able to apply them, and coping with the normal stresses of life, being able to contribute, work productively, and make a contribution to the community. And most of us hopefully are doing that. But mental health is a continuum. So you don't get very very sick and you don't get very, very well. Most of us are right in the middle. Just with with physical health, we're kind of wanting to be as healthy as we can, but sometimes we do get sick, and sometimes it takes a long time to recover. So mental health is the same thing. It's health, okay? So mental health is a cause. There's a quote there that says mental illness is a diagnosable illness. So what is an illness? An illness is something that runs you down and creates dysfunction. So you can't really function when you're sick. Some of you have a cold in bed and you can't go to work. Your friends call you, you don't want to talk to them, or you find that annoying. And so there's a lot of issues with illness that causes major changes in one's thinking, one's feeling, and one's behavior, and it impairs functioning. So that's basically like any sickness, isn't it? Physical sickness. So no different, huh? But with mental illness, people wear masks. Why do we wear masks? Because of the shame attached to mental illness. If you're physically sick and somebody say, what's wrong? You say, I have a cold. Yeah? Or the doctor just told me I've got this, I've got that. You don't really feel so much shame. Maybe a little, sometimes. But with mental illness, a lot of people don't want to talk about their illness. Depression, anxiety. And these are the masks that people wear. I had a student at Monash from overseas, and she said, when I'm with my friends, I'm the life of the party, I smile, I laugh, I talk to them. When I go home, I cry, and they don't see that. I said, why do you show them? They said, they can't handle it. Everybody wants a happy face, and nobody wants to know about my depression. So masks are very common. But when we learn to not judge and make it a safe environment to talk about it, people let down their masks. And that's what we want to do in church, right? We really want to be able to let our mask down, but we need to create a safe place. So removing the stigma of mental illness is that we need to stop using words like what? What kind of terrible words do we use when we talk about mental illness that people shun? What's a good one that people hear? Crazy, yeah? So we should try and use this word like crazy less, because crazy doesn't really mean anything. Somebody told me a word called fruit basket, in Australia. Fruit basket. So when I first came as an international student, I said, wow, lots of fruit. What kind of fruits? It's a fruit basket. Oh, he's going to bring a basket full of fruits. It's a pretty bad word. So we have words like loony, psycho is a bad one because of the movie. So these words, we need to stop using them, because when we stop using them in the community, then we can start using respectful words, proper words. We don't use words like psycho on someone who's physically sick, right? Why should we do it to mentally ill? So what words do we use for mental illness? We use the name of the illness: depression, anxiety, bipolar, okay, schizophrenia. So we use the words that describe the sickness. The good thing is that people will wonder what is that, and then you can start to talk about it. But you need to learn what it's all about. Okay? So a disabled mind is like a disabled arm or leg. With a broken leg, if I've got a broken leg, you can see it if I limp, yeah? And all of you will say, oh, that poor guy, and have lots of pity. It might even help to carry my bags. Maybe not. But if someone has a mental illness, you do not see the brokenness in them. You just see the dysfunction, and then they are labeled as weak, they are labeled as lazy, that sort of negative connotations. So mental unwellness needs to be treated like physical unwellness. No difference, huh? So judgment is something that we want to remove in mental illness. Okay, so some of the myths of mental illness are mental illness doesn't exist, some people are just weak or lazy. Have you heard of this? Okay, just imagine substituting it with physical illness. How does that feel? Ridiculous, right? So you can't say that about physical illness. Mental illness, people are all mad. You don't say that about physical illness. So why do we discriminate? Mental illness is caused by bad parenting. Have you heard that? Can you say physical illness is caused by bad parenting? It's illogical. You see? You get what I'm trying to do? So we need to treat mental illness like a physical illness, so that when we talk about illness, it's just illness. The brain is an organ just like the heart and the lung. So it should not be discriminated. Alright? So the survey shows that 1 in every 5 persons in Australia has mental illness. Varying degrees. Alright? And there's a lot of people. So if I were to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there'd be like 30 people here. Okay, out of 140. Alright? So physical illness like normal medical conditions, mental illness can be acute, it can be lifelong, or it can be just short term. But the good news is, like with any illness, it can be treated and you can live happy, productive lives if you get the right help. Right? And you're not alone. So I had 2 cases where these 2 students, and they gave permission to use the name, but it doesn't really matter. Daniel and Mary said that they were suicidal every day. They arrived in Australia from overseas and they were like suicidal every day. And they had to come and see us. One of them asked to see 2 counselors a week. It's really intense. But today, after so many years, they are now working. They built their houses and they got married. One of them became a Christian. So it's quite amazing. People can actually recover and live happy, productive lives. So what is the most common mental illness in Australia? Who knows that? What did you say? Anxiety, okay. Who thinks it's depression? A few people, hands up. Who thinks it's substance addiction? Alright. And I used to think it's depression, but the truth is it's anxiety. It starts with anxiety. And it leads to depression and so forth. So, do more men or women suffer from anxiety? More women? Hands up. Okay, more men? Depending on who you're with. And what about depression? More women or men? More women? More men? Okay, a lot I don't know, I'm not sure. What about substance abuse? More men? Yeah, a bit more hands, and what about more women? Okay. And do more young people suffer from mental illness than adults? More young people? More adults? Okay. So there's more hands for young people. Let's have a look at the stats. Huh? Alright. So the truth is anxiety is the most common followed by depression and substance abuse. So these are the stats. Alright? You can see more women, this is self-reporting. More women are saying that they have anxiety more than men. Maybe because the men are not saying it, I don't know. But the stats show that more women are saying they struggle with anxiety and depression. But substance abuse, more men. So possibly the substance abuse numb the pain of depression and anxiety. You don't know. Alright? So they depend more on substances. Young people, more males, more adult males than young males are suffering from anxiety, depression. But substance abuse, look at that, double for young males. That's probably because, legal age, they can drink. So they're into that. But women, more young girls are suffering from anxiety and depression than older women, more young girls. Huh? And that's why there's a lot of suicides among young girls now. So overall, that's the alright, I'll have to move on because of time. The median age, meaning that 50% of people who are going to get sick will get sick by this age, 50%. So with anxiety, it's as young as 15, followed by all the rest is 18. Now depression is 25, this accumulated mental illness. Eventually they get very severely depressed at 25. So 18 is the age. So, this is, we're talking about young people here. And with increased anxiety leads to depression, substance use, and so it gets worse. Okay? Now, the thing is that not many people will get help because of the shame and stigma. There are other reasons as well. So only 35% will get help. Okay? So, if you guys want to, I can provide it, alright? Okay, why barrier to help seeking? So, these are some of the things that, the reason why people don't get help. Huh? And we'll talk about this in the panel. I won't go through that now. But stigma is a big one. And like any illness, mental illness creates disability. So, I had a lot of students in Monash who can't do exams. They come to exam hall and go home. There's so much anxiety about not passing or not doing well. So a lot of debilitating effects of mental illness. It is the third biggest source of disease after cancer and heart diseases. And for young people, it's the biggest cause of burdens, disease burden, 50% by the age of 18. So what I'm trying to do here is to show that there's very strong impact when you have a mental illness. If you compare it with physical illness, it's almost like with moderate depression, we think it's just moderate. But it's as bad as severe asthma, multiple sclerosis, chronic hepatitis B. So this is a comparison, like with post-traumatic stress, it can be compared to the disability from paraplegia. Okay? So what they've done is they've done weighting tests, very complicated, but they have found that this is similar. Now, I'm going to just talk about suicide. How much time we got? 5, okay. So with this one, as you can see, the black color stands for roll call. Now, if the orange one, the short ones are the homicide, assault, but the yellow ones is suicide. So if you're looking at suicide having a higher rate than people who die from the road accidents, there's a lot more advertisement about road accidents than suicide. So it's beginning to change now. Hopefully, there's more information more about suicide. Okay, this is the age. So around almost 20, the suicide rates go up, and then 40s, and then you go up. It tapers down up to about 80s in the 80s. And you can speculate why. Okay? So the 20s, 40s, 80s. All right, suicide is a significant health issue, and the cost is substantial in terms of human cost and economic cost. But it's preventable. 75% of people who suicide are men, and which age group has the highest rate is young people. Highest rate of suicidal thoughts and attempts. So if you look at the suicide, the purple, that's the one on suicide, okay, for young people. So this just came in. My friend yesterday texted me this information about recently reported a young girl by the name of Rochelle Fry. I want to put a photo there to show you that it's not just a statistics, a real person who passed away because of suicide, and she was only 14, and it's all because of racism and bullying. And she said, once I'm gone, all this will stop. So there's so much pain that people give up their lives, young people. 2 days later, somebody else died. 2 days later, another girl died. And it goes on. Within 2 weeks of this year, there was like six girls died from suicide within 2 weeks of the year. That's how serious it is, huh? So when he sent me this, I was really in tears because it's so tragic. So look at this. Aboriginal and rural communities suffer more, 1 in 4, and it's likely to be 5 times more than non-Indigenous children. So Rochelle was Indigenous background, 1 in 4. Okay, 10 to 1 death per 100,000 compared to 2. So hopelessness is a big thing among Aboriginal and rural communities. Okay, just something to know now. So the big picture is that we don't really realize how big the figures are. We were talking about 2018. This is how many people died per day, 8 per day. 2017, 2016. So it's going up. But the unreported suicides are much higher. Because the coroner doesn't say suicide, it could be suicide. But it's just not enough evidence. Suicidal behaviors, suicidal attempts about 50 to 100 times more, 40 to 100 times more. And you're looking at people affected by it, tremendous. About 1.3 million people think of suicide according to ABS 2018. So people want to escape pain, and so if there's no other way out, they will look at ending their lives. Okay? And also to communicate to people that people who are suicidal actually want to live, but the pain is too much. So they're ambivalent. But if there's hope and there's support, they won't suicide. Okay? So a large majority of people suffer from mental illness as a result is suicide. So it's linked. All right. So this is just some of the risks. So in the course we cover a lot on all this. All right. So if you want to do the course, now again, there's a lot of information there. These are some of the invitations we call it, people giving signs so that you can ask them about suicide. Now, the thing about suicide is you've got to ask. A lot of people dare not ask, and if you know this person died of suicide, you wish you had asked. Okay, so it's better to ask than not to ask. There's nothing wrong in asking, just not knowing what to do after that scares people. But it's really not that difficult. Okay, so again, I won't go into too much of time, but Daniel he's still around. He was a student at Monash, and he was suicidal every day. But one day he came up to the counseling appointment. He was on his way to the city, and he wanted to jump off. But he kept his counseling appointment. So that's saying something, isn't it? He wants to live. And so in the appointment, he did not mention suicide at all. But because we're trained to pick up, so we were talking about life and death issues. And so I said to him, "Daniel, are you thinking of ending your life? You're talking about life and death." Then he said, "Yeah, I'm on my way now." So we called up the crisis team and got him help. And there were 2 times that he wanted to end his life. But the good news is, he's so fine now. He became a Christian, and I always joke about this, but he's now in paradise, surface paradise. Okay? So he has actually moved over there to enjoy the weather there. But Daniel still recently he came up to see me, and we catch up. He just got married, and it's amazing. So direct questioning is important. If I didn't ask Daniel the question, "Are you thinking of ending your life?" he would have gone and did it. So it's important to ask, and not are you thinking of harming, but are you thinking of ending your life or suicide? Okay. All right. So I threw this issue in because I think this is really important. That people who picked up on someone and wanting them, I need to ask them and then learn what to do after that. Okay. The important thing here is this is a course that one of the parents who did the course. In fact, there were about 3 of them, but I just put this one. And she said that they went and asked their teenage kids, and out of 4, 3 of the kids say yes, they were thinking of suicide. So they managed to get them help. The last course we ran. So it's important to know how to ask, and in the course we teach people how to ask, confidently. People need you to ask. People want you to ask. So if you think of someone, and the person, you ask the question and they say yes, stay with them and get help. Link them with professional help, okay? Now these are all the numbers you can call for if someone is thinking of suicide, okay? There's quite a few numbers there, so you can have this, and I think you've got some hotlines there. And the course is basically available to you. We're running one in March, and it's basically knowing how to help someone who's in a crisis, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, self-harming, and what to do, how to get them help. Okay, so the green aspect, part of it, the green part of it is mental health first aid, where you provide first aid to someone who's getting sick or someone who's really sick. Okay, and so once the professional help is given, that's your job's done. Basically, it's like a first aider. If someone has a heart attack, you keep them alive until the ambulance comes. So with mental crisis, it's like that. And basically, we teach you how to approach a young person or adult person, listen without judgment, support, and give information and get them help. Okay? Okay, that's our mascot. And people do get a certificate and they do get a manual as a result of doing this. Okay? And I think you will tell you there's discounts available for people who register their name. All right? So I've spoken about Daniel, so I don't need to say anymore. Because I have a video to show, but it's not possible. Have I run out of time? Great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I'll just get the panel members to come back up. So Jimmy, you can take a seat up here instead of down there. We'll get Anne and Yin to come up as Meredith. Put you on the spot, Yin. Alright, so we're going to have some panel questions. We'll launch straight in. At the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So if you have any, you want to remember them, maybe write them down. We've got 2 slips of paper on the chair, so if you need to write on them, feel free. Okay. I'll wait for everyone to get happy. If you girls and guys can say your name into your microphone, just to test it out, that would be lovely. Hello. Yep. Can you hear Meredith?
Yep.
Up to that? Yep. There you go. And loud enough?
I can talk louder.
You can talk, you can use your mum voice. Okay. And Jimmy, if you can just check yours as well.
Okay.
Okay. Alright, so let's launch straight in. There's a lot of information Jimmy's given already, but we'll just try and tease some more things out. Okay. Alright, so straight in. I think Jimmy covered a little bit of it, but what are some of the ways depression and anxiety presents itself? How do we recognise it if someone is suffering from a mental health problem, as opposed to someone who's just having a hard time? Okay, so perhaps Dr. Anne, I'll ask you to tell us a bit about signs and symptoms.
So depression or anxiety can present in so many different ways. And the sneaky thing about it is that it can be so gradual that you don't even realise that it's happened. So some of the symptoms of depression can include having low mood, loss of interest in things that you used to enjoy, significant changes in weight, so that's both weight loss, but it can also be weight gain, and changes to your appetite, having difficulties with sleep, so that's both having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, but perhaps it might also be just sleeping for a really long time. You can feel very tired. You can feel like your thoughts are really slow and have difficulty concentrating. You can also have these feelings of guilt or worthlessness. And sometimes, as we've mentioned, these feelings can feel so significant that people do think about suicide or self-harm. Changing tact into anxiety. So anxiety is this uncomfortable inner feeling of fear or imminent danger that is disproportionately large to the actual situation itself. And I'll give some examples in a moment. And some of these symptoms of anxiety, they can include restlessness or being quite fidgety, also being quite fatigued, having difficulty concentrating. You can be quite irritable. It also affects your sleep. But it can also show itself in some physical symptoms as well. So feeling like your heart's about to jump out of your chest, or you have these sweaty palms or shaky hands, or even shortness of breath. And I can kind of hear some of you going, oh gosh, that's exactly how I felt just before going for that interview or preparing for this mental health panel. But we will all experience these symptoms to some extent throughout our lives. It is completely appropriate to the situation. It's when it is prolonged, or if it starts to actually affect your everyday life, that's when we want to start to have a conversation.
So it sounds like, those are general symptoms, depression and anxiety. I just want to focus on women for a moment because we are all, minus one. I have to keep saying that tonight. Women obviously go through many stages and changes during life, and there's a lot of hormonal changes, emotional changes. Our body just does all sorts of weird things. I think it's probably fair to say that we don't necessarily understand how at these various stages we might be more susceptible to, falling into something like a mental health illness. So Anne, would you be able to outline for us some of the stages that we as women go through, what normal changes perhaps, and what are some of the triggers that could lead to mental illness? Right?
Yeah, so there certainly are periods in women's lives where we are just that little bit more vulnerable. Please don't get me wrong, please don't think that if you're not in any of these stages that we go through that you go, whew, I'm safe, I've dodged a bullet there. This can strike at any time in terms of anxiety or depression, but we are just flagging that there are certain stages. One of these is adolescence. So there's a lot going on developmental-wise, physically, mentally, emotionally. This is where friends and fitting in becomes a major focus. And any kind of hiccup in this can feel really life-changing. It can all get very overwhelming and confusing over this time. Attached to this need to fit in is body image. Now, that's not going to be a focus for us tonight. And certainly body image and eating disorders, they can also strike at any time in your life, at any gender as well. But just flagging here that during these teens, it's a very vulnerable time to develop something like an eating disorder.
But we will expand a bit on adolescence just a little bit later, because I'm sure we do have parents of teenagers here and probably want more clarity on hormonal stuff, behaviours and things like that. So we'll cover that a little bit more as well. And then the next area.
So let's talk about after having a baby. So postnatal depression, once again, lots of changes going on. So women are dealing with lack of sleep, these rapid changes in hormones, you're feeling both physically and emotionally overwhelmed, and women can also really feel pressured during this time. You have this new life that you're responsible for. And then all these people are coming up and telling you what a precious time it is, you should enjoy it, but you don't. Because you've had 2 hours of sleep every night for what feels like 60 years, and you feel so guilty for not enjoying it. Can I just say to anyone who this resonates with, you are not alone. Take it from someone who's experienced the early baby stage, a number of times. It is tough. You know, there's constantly crying and pooping and feeding and carrying and changing and crying and pooping, and it's a cycle. You feel like it's a cycle, and it can really, really drain you. What is important though is that you do recognise when you're heading towards that edge of it being just that little bit too much and it being a little bit too overwhelming, that you have that courage to put up your hand and signal for help. Everybody needs help during the early years, and it doesn't indicate that you're a failure, it indicates that you're human. Often, because of this fog that happens during the baby stage, women might come, once that fog lifts, 6 or 12 months later down the track, that's when you go, oh, gosh, that wasn't right. That's not how I was supposed to feel. So I guess the question is, how do we recognise it early so then we can access help early? There are a number of ways that we can do it. I have a few questions though that I tend to ask to just kind of tease it out a little bit. One of these questions is, do you feel guilty for long periods of time? Let's talk about mum guilt. Everybody's going to have mum guilt. Sometimes many times a day. But if it's guilt that you are constantly thinking about and it is overtaking all of your thoughts throughout the day, let's start a conversation. Another question I ask is, do you still have moments where you enjoy your baby? And how often is that? So, new mums will come in and say, oh, it's so hard, I don't know how you did it. And it's true, it's tough. It really is. And they do push you to the edge, but they're also very smart. Because what they will do is you'll be right there and you say, oh, and then they'll smile at you. Or they'll giggle, or they'll put their arms around you, give you a cuddle and say, I love you, mummy. And then you just go, oh, okay, all right, I can keep going, that's great. I love you too, honey. But if you're not having those moments where you can step back from the edge, let's explore it a little bit more. And just ever so briefly, another question that I tend to ask is, do you find yourself crying for no particular reason? Look, crying is good. It's a very good emotional release. But if you're crying a lot of the days, or you're crying multiple days, then let's start a conversation about it. There are also a few protective factors with regards to postnatal depression. One of these is actually having time to yourself. And this is where you can do whatever you want. Catch up on sleep, that's a really big one. Going for a massage, actually drinking your coffee hot, amazing, amazing. And another really good protective thing is to have support around you. So I do apologise for going on so much about postnatal depression, but the struggle that new mums have is just a passion of mine, so thanks for indulging me.
Just your last point there, the importance of support. So how important is it for new mums to have, say, other mums to talk to who are going through the same thing, like a village?
Yeah. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say 200. It is super important, and there are a number of reasons why. So one of them is camaraderie. Just to know that someone else has gone through it, they've actually made it through that tunnel, and they are this fountain of knowledge because they've tried particular techniques that they know don't work, so you won't need to do it, and they know what particular techniques will work for their kids, so then you're more likely to try it and you're more likely to be successful. So that's really good. But another thing which I think is also really important is the fact that you realise that what you're going through is actually super common, like miscarriages. It's surprising how common miscarriages are, but we don't talk about it. And it's surprising how common postnatal depression is, but we don't talk about it. So it's just knowing that you're not alone that gives you that extra added support. Let's talk about menopause. So this period, or lack of it, I'm feeling good, is another big one. So just like in adolescence, there's a lot going on, both physically, emotionally, mentally. You know, your body goes, oh, hang on, this is weird, it's not me, I don't like it. And that's where anxiety or depression can kind of sneak in there.
Do you actually find a lot of women in that age group present with that, or they just kind of muddle through and it passes, does it? Then you keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is probably underdiagnosed as well. You know, like I said, there's so much physical stuff going on, and things that used to work for you don't work anymore, and you're like, what's going on? And women kind of come in and go, oh, you know what, this is just menopause, this is what I have to go through. But who says that that's actually what you have to go through? So I think it's important to know that if you're struggling with it, you don't have to. That's when you do start a conversation with your trusted GP. And just our last point is grief. Grief and having a period of sadness attached to that is normal. It's going to affect your everyday life. The important thing to do during this stage, though, is to not do it alone. Make use of your family. Make use of your friends. Make use of your pastor and your life group. Lean on them during this time. do it with other people. If it continues for a long time, and sometimes it does, or if it gets really hard, you might just need a little help to get through this particular chapter, and that's when, once again, you go and visit your trusted GP.
All right. I think grief, I know so it's obvious that you'll experience grief if there is a loss, especially a loss of a loved one. But sometimes we can be grieving for another reason without expecting it, or not recognise that something's happened in our lives and what we're going through is actually grieving. So what are some other causes of grief?
Yeah, so yes, we do often think of losing a loved one, whether it's a person or a pet, but there are other areas in life that you will experience grief, like perhaps losing a job. So grief is just sadness about losing something, whether it's a job or whether it's your independence. And often this is what we see is as you get older, unfortunately, it's not as safe to drive, or you just might need to use some incontinence pads, and it makes people feel just a little bit lost because they've lost something that they were in control of. So I guess it is very important to know that grief, you don't just attach grief to the loss of someone, but it can also be associated with the loss of something.
All right, so
I just say that with grief, a lot of people at council find that they need actually guidance how to grieve in a healthy way. And some people, like I had one, the eldest in the family, this chap, his father died, and he had to take charge, and mom was in tears. Everybody was, in tears, and he had to be a strong one, and he didn't grieve. And so 10 years later, he was bawling his eyes out in the church when the altar was called. 10 years later. So people need actually to be guided how to grieve. Or not, it's delayed, and sometimes it could be even complicated grief. So, I had one mother who's angry with the husband who drove the car and with the kids, and they all died. And she was angry with the husband, but she was grieving as well. Very complicated too. So, yeah, it requires help in that sense. When people don't grieve, and you kind of wonder why, and you want to kind of go a bit more.
It sounds like everybody who goes through some sort of grief really actually should go through some sort of counselling, but it's not available, I guess, or it's not often. I don't think it. Yeah, so that's something to remember. As Anne has reminded us a few times, which is good, the first point of call is your GP. So if you're going through any of these things and you think you need to start that conversation, when's the right time to seek help from the GP in a nutshell?
I think it's never too early to start a conversation. And this is where the importance of finding the right GP for you comes into play. So to find a GP that you feel comfortable talking to about everything and anything and opening you up. As a GP, we're here to help and we want to help, but we won't be able to help to the best of our ability unless you let us in. So that's really important. As I mentioned at the start, anxiety or depression can present in lots of different ways, and it can come on gradually. So sometimes you don't realise that it's starting until you're actually deep in it. And that's why I feel like it's never too early to start that conversation. If you're just not feeling quite right, you can't quite put your finger on what it is, but it's just, everything just feels a bit wrong, start a conversation. If any of those symptoms that I mentioned earlier, if that kind of resonated with you, start a conversation. If it's starting to impact areas of your life, start a conversation. I've had a fair few patients come in and they'll say, oh, it will pass. I just need to get through this stage and then I'll be right. Or things will get better. And look, sometimes it does. But how long will that time be? mental illness is a journey. There will be good days and there will be bad days. But it's important to understand that you don't have to travel this journey alone.
I think we should all think about whether we do have a trusted GP. Because for those of us that don't need to go to the GP very often, you probably don't have a good relationship with one. And as you grow and you go through all these life stages, it will be important to have a good GP that you trust. So just have a think about if you do, and if you don't, perhaps go out and find one.
And the other thing is most GPs see about 50 minutes, yeah? Is that right?
Yeah, generally speaking.
So, you know, when we refer students to see a GP for mental health issues, we ask them to ask for a half an hour appointment, 30-minute appointment, because you really need that time to do the mental health plan and for the GP to assess, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would second that. 100%.
Okay. So even though we should see our GP or even a counsellor if we think we're struggling, people will have reasons for not taking that step. So I think Jimmy flashed up a slide earlier about some of the stigma or some of the reasons. Can perhaps Jimmy and Meredith expand a bit on some of the common fears or stigma attached to seeking help, that kind of thing?
What's worse is that people get all kinds of wrong information, and then with that wrong information, it's passed around and becomes even scarier. And the media is responsible for a lot of that. You know, whenever you read about someone who's mentally ill, it's always very acute, very serious, very violent. But most people who are mentally ill are actually not perpetrators. You know, they are scared and they are afraid, and they're the victims. You know, so there's a lot of misconceptions, misunderstanding, stigma, of course. You know, fear of judgment, and particularly if you're meant to be all together. If you work in professions, I had a policeman who said, "I'm not going to tell anyone if I'm mentally ill. You know, I'll lose my job, and and you're supposed to be strong, healthy, safe to the public. And if you yourself say, so vocation, some vocation pastors, pastors burn out, and so who are they going to tell? So there's all these pressures on certain occupations, and also religion as well. We'll talk about that later on.
I think one of the things is that sometimes we're afraid to be honest. We don't want to come clean. And yet when you look at our God, He knows you more than anyone. Sometimes we talk to each other more than we talk to God. We hit the phone before we hit the throne. Yeah? And the thing is that God is present with us. There is nothing that you can ask me that I cannot find the answer in the Word of God for you. Because when it is our reality, that is when we know the hope. Because He died for our pain. And whatever is preventing you from opening up, I don't see myself up here and you down here. Because you know what? We all have this journey. We all have issues. You know, when I was in a wheelchair for 25 years and I lost my independence and I had to make a decision. Was this going to define me, or was I going to be a victim, or was I going to be an inspiration? You know what? When we decide that we use our pain for good because we know Jesus has taken our pain, it changes our attitude. Because it's not what happens to us, it's how we deal with it alongside the Word of God, and it works. I have seen people's lives transformed by not only knowing the Word of God, because there's so many of us who live as if we're not Christians. You know, it's like the prison doors are open, but we're staying in. We have the answer, and it's such a thrill to journey with people. And it's like, when all else fails, read the instructions. But you know what? We need to read them first, because they're there for us. We all have this Word of God. And it's amazing how stigma can be broken down into, you know what, when we have pain, let us work through it, aligned by the Word of God, not by being religious, but by being real, by being able to just talk honestly and openly. And that's why I love going into homes, into coffee shops, keeping teenagers in the car so I can talk to them, they don't jump out. I take them to the beach, whatever. You know, we can meet people on neutral ground so that we allow them to feel that they can open up in freedom and with lack of judgment.
Thank you. Preach it.
Bad experiences is another one. You know, I went to a dentist one time, and this guy, his needles that long, I think, and does that stop me from seeing another dentist? No, I still, I still look for another. Now, what happens with people who get counselling is they give up. They had a bad experience with one counsellor and give up. And so we need to encourage people to just see as many different ones so that they have a more positive experience, not give up totally. Okay.
I guess to maybe also demystify what happens. So if you feel like you do want to approach the GP or seek help from a counsellor, what are the initial approaches that you take? So we feel like we need to see someone, we present to our GP, what happens next?
Yeah, so it's very important to know that mental illness, it can be treated, and it can be treated well. For me, there are a number of things that are important in treatment. Lifestyle changes, and also psychology or counselling. And I'll kind of go into that a little bit later. In terms of lifestyle changes, these are things that you as an individual have control of, and you can take charge of. And these are things like having regular exercise, having sort of relatively healthy eating habits, good sleep hygiene, and that's also one of my loves, so if you ever want to talk about that, I'm very open to it. Having regular exposure to sunlight. And the reason why I recommend doing all of these things is because if you fill your body with good things and you have it in really good tip-top shape, then you have the energy and the focus to be able to focus on you mentally. Another possible helping hand in terms of treatment is medication. Now, generally speaking, if we start the conversations early, we may not need it. But sometimes it is. And this is where, once again, that relationship with a GP that you trust is really important. Because just as sometimes antibiotics are needed, sometimes medication is needed to help treat mental illness. It's also important to recognise that medication does not need to be lifelong. It's not a life sentence. It's just something that may be required during this particular chapter, and then once things stabilise, it can always be reviewed.
Okay, thanks, Anne. So beyond that, if we've been to our GP and we've tried all these things, at what point would you refer to a psychologist or a psychiatrist? For all of you, being counsellors and GP, at what point would you need to go to that next step? Because I think initially some people might think, well, if I tell my GP I'm going through this, they're going to shoot me off to a psychiatrist, they're going to medicate me, and then, I don't know what's going to happen next. But when do you actually need to do that?
Yeah, so I always like to get either psychology or counselling going early. So it's not just about talking, it's actually about education in terms of recognising when your mood starts to dip or when that anxiety is just starting to snowball, and also being able to equip you with tools and aids that can help prevent it from getting worse. In terms of a psychiatrist, I tend to refer when things are just a little bit more complex. So if we happen to decide that medication was needed and we've tried a few of the common ones and it just hasn't quite done what we wanted it to do, that's when I'd refer on. Or if I felt like it wasn't a sort of simple anxiety or depression that was driving the mental illness, that's when I would refer. But please don't feel like when you're referred off to a psychiatrist that you're being palmed off that you've been put in the too hard basket and then the GP puts you in there and says, bye-bye, see you later, and closes the door. Because that's not how it works. It's just getting a little bit of extra help in the village during this time. Sometimes what happens is that if the psychiatrist is able to get things a little bit more stable, they'll often send you back to your GP for those regular reviews. And that's why I like to continue to have regular reviews even while my patients are seeing a psychiatrist, so then I know what's going on. I'm still a part of the village and I'm still on that journey with you. Julie and Meredith, anything to add?
Yes, I had a client who, every time he comes to counseling at the end of the session, he felt better. So he'll come again, he felt better, but during the week he goes down. But when he was referred to a GP for medication, that didn't happen. So that sustained him every day, and he could come for counseling and he could apply what we've given, but his moods were stabilized. So medication has a place together with therapy. So it's all what we call a balanced approach. The other thing I would refer is because the symptoms are not very clear, and it's all over the place, or there's complication, I would refer them to a psychiatrist. And also when progress is difficult, when there's psychosis involved, schizophrenia, bipolar, you need medication, so I would refer them to. And also like eating disorders as well, it's not within my specialty, I would refer them.
Yeah, I think we've got to look at boundaries here. Because it's really important that we don't see ourselves as being able to diagnose everything. But what we look for is symptomatology. So when I do a mental health assessment, I'm very aware of the fact that I've got a bit of nursing background from a long time ago. But I've been doing this 32 years. And for me, the secret is asking questions. It's really important that we find out where your heart is and where your faith is and where your feelings are. Because that's a really good generator to me about where you are. And then I can go away and I can just think about it, but I'm very respectful of boundaries because we all work together, and to respect a good psychiatrist and to know that they're just not going to push drugs, that they're actually going to look at people as people and humans. And we live in such a society where we've got to be really careful about choosing doctors and about choosing professionals. I think something we need to pray about.
Going from that, I guess, if you get to see somebody, that's good because then you're on that journey of getting help. And what are some of the, I just want to go back to, what are some of the other most common fears or stigma attached to seeking that help in the first place? Perhaps you could address, we're from a culturally diverse background in here. For example, is it different working with those from an Asian background as opposed to a Western culture? Stigmas attached, fears. Can we name them, call them out, so that we can then try to break some of those down?
Well, in Asian context, we've always talked about saving face. Yeah, and this. So what happens is people save face, but what happens? They do lose the whole body to suicide. And so there was a student from overseas in Malaysia, and he actually was in a lot of psychological pain. He was from the top university in his country, and he was meant to do his final year in Australia, but his English wasn't very good. So you mentioned that, so much stress, he wanted to go home. But because he came from a shame-based society, the parents said, no, you come home. He meant to stay 1 year. He was only here for 3 weeks. And his parents said, you come back now, we'll all be put to shame. And the girlfriend said, you come back, I'll break up with you. So, he couldn't go for his lectures, he couldn't understand, he wanted to go home, couldn't go home. So he killed himself. And so when parents came over, they were looking for someone to blame. But then they realized that they were the ones who told him not to come back. And they felt very sorry. So just this thing about culture is that we need to remind people that the person is more important than the reputation.
I also think there's a lot to do with, I work with Bill Ponticus, okay, and he's Greek, okay, so he's very demonstrative. Some of the Italian people are, you know, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you know, and the Asian people are, you know what, I'm not going to let my feelings out. There's no way I'm going to tell you what I really feel, you know. They hold it in, mate, yeah, they really hold it. And you know what, it's like, pulling, I don't know, it's hard. But you know what, when you look at the combination of faith and feelings, we cannot let our feelings dictate our behaviour, because when we do that, we actually give power to the person who's actually hurting us. Why would we want to give away power? Our role is to be empowered by God, isn't it? And to reclaim that power and to know how to not be triggered by other people. So we looked at faith and we looked at feelings and we looked at fact. So I feel this, but I actually know that I'm not really well, and my faith tells me that I can get through. So we need to marry that, but we also need to give a balance in that area. And for me, the privilege of working across cultures, really we've got to know a little bit about the culture so that we can understand where they're coming from. And that's our role, to support people from different cultures. But you know, we as women, we speak with our emotions more than we do facts. And you know, that's why I like working with men more than women. Not really. But you know what? It's infinitely more complex, because we are more complex. Because when I looked around when Juliet asked about menopause, I saw these women smile, and I thought, oh yeah. You know what, we are complex. But God has provided a way for both men and women to really live in that victory and to be personally empowered by that amazing grace that we have.
I think, but other than culture, you talk about religion as well. So in the church, there can be this barrier. How can we, in churches, be more supportive? How can we break down the stigma on that front?
Well, you know, it depends on how we see church, because the church is meant to be a clinic, isn't it? Well, you know, Jesus is the physician, so it's meant to be a clinic where people who are unwell come. But some churches have become an opera house of performers. Not this church, of course. So what happens is people do not want to show their weaknesses. They do not want to show their mental weaknesses, because it becomes like, you know, you shouldn't be sick, just pray, and the thought that prayer can solve everything. But we know that people do die of cancer with just prayer. Prayers do get healing, but some prayers don't. We don't know why. So we really need to treat mental illness just the same way as physical, and allow people to feel sick, to feel so okay, to be not okay. Yeah.
Do you feel like part of that misconception is that as Christians we are not actually susceptible to mental illness, when in fact we are not immune to going through mental illness? So how do you counsel Christians differently? Do they experience it differently? I mean, you know.
Now, for me, I think the church is the people. And I think we've got to learn to walk as God would have us walk, and journey with people in the lack of judgment. We would have far less people who are angry and upset and disempowered with the love of God if we knew how our authority and how love translates to them. Because, you know, we don't want to be Christians who are people who live in abject doubt, whatever. We need to feel that, we need to work through it. But if God has provided a way, then why don't we strive to walk in that way? Because when I got in the wheelchair, you know what? The greatest thing that happened to me was James 1:3. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. You know what? It is not asking why, it is asking what can I learn and how can I grow? Because if we look at things as opportunities to grow and not problems, it changes our perspective and it helps us to see hope. The greatest thing that our church needs today with people is hope. And if they can't see it in us, where are they going to see it? Like, we are living examples, aren't we? So, that is the power that we have to live with it. And ministering to Christians is something I love, because to see people change and grow and be changed by the power of God, to see them learn about their mental illnesses, to see them as not being different but being part of a growth process. And it's amazing the change that we can make when we start to look inside ourselves and say, you know what, how well I know me, but how little I really know how to apply the Word of God. Do you know what a privilege that is for you guys, the church, to help others to do? It's so amazing.
Do you have anything to add as far as Christians going through it?
The more I think of it, Christians and non-Christians, we're the same. The only difference is we've got God and they don't. So we do go through, the weather shines, the rain and sun shines on Christians and non-Christians. So we do get sick, we do get hurt and we do get depressed. And so we need to accept that we are human. And we need to create this understanding that we're all the same, but we do have God. And what Melissa says, I heard this sermon yesterday, and it says that when Peter was standing on the water, when he had a faith to do it, he felt like all powerful. Sometimes we feel like Peter, he's standing on water, we can do miracles. But then what happened to Peter? He started to sing because his faith, deteriorated. And sometimes that happens to us. We start to sing, and the message was that Christ is there when he called on him. He just grabbed him and pulled him up. And that's the message I want to share, is that Jesus is very near. And that, you just have to call on him. But we need to accept that we're like Peter. We can be strong, we can be weak. Okay?
Yeah, it sounds like it's the journey, right? So we're not exempt, just like we're not exempt from physical illness. So if you are a Christian and you're going through mental illness, I think we need to not judge ourselves as well and say, well, I shouldn't be. I'm a follower of Jesus, I love Jesus, I'm following Jesus, why am I going through this? And how American said, we're not asking the question why so much, just like with other illnesses, but we actually have to journey through that with Jesus, right? So I just want to make that point. It's something that we can go through as well. Okay, I just want to talk about how we can work with people, loved ones who are experiencing it. I think this is something we need to talk about. How can we best support them? So from your professional point of view, can you give us some tools or strategies or just some advice?
So I think when you talk about safe place, we need to create a safe conversation. And so lots of affirmation is important, and affirming the good about the person. Because a lot of people mentally ill feel terrible about themselves. They feel they're failures, they're weak, and so affirming the positives about them is really important. Giving them hope. The other thing I would mention also is that mental illness is a medical condition like physical illness. So there is treatment available, there is support available. And when we're actually doing the therapy in a session, we will work on the way they think. I would work on the way they think and feel, based on really questioning what's going on in your mind. Is that biblical? And also, is that logical as well? Because quite often it's not. So it's helping them to see that the way they're thinking is not really the truth. The truth will set you free. So it's about bringing truth to them, helping them to see that.
What about on a day-to-day basis? If you're,
I think normalisation is really important. Often if I have someone who's really struggling, I will go out with them into the community, and we will talk out there. We will mix with people who are not compromised in the way that they are. So I think integration is really important, like helping them to be in the life groups and stuff like that. You know, there was a lady at Cafe Care a few months ago and she had her head down. And someone came up and said to me, is she blind? And I said, no, just no one's talking to her. So I started talking to her and she lifted her head up. You know, I think we make assumptions and I think we are really good at faking it to make it. You know, how many times do you ask someone how they are, and men will not normally say, women will just go on and on and on and on. Sometimes you wish you never asked the question. But you know, it is, I had someone say to me in church last week, you know, when I ask this girl how she is, she doesn't stop. And I said to this guy, well, what does that show you? You know, that she needs to talk. Let's go out with her, let's have lunch with her. You know what? When we discover people's pain, that takes time for us. That is a journey. And that's why we're here, to invest in each other and to share in each other's life, to share in each other's journey. But you can't just share. It is about, there's a deeper issue here. Where is their relationship with God? Are we praying with them? Where are we teaching them the Word of God? I always give people homework. You know what? They stop coming to me when they don't want to do homework, but I still persist. Because I always say, what does the scripture mean? What does it mean to you? And how can you apply it to your life? You know what? We need to know the Word of God. It says, hide the Word of God in your heart, do it when it sin against you. No way do I think that mental illness or schizophrenia or psychosis or anything else has any bearing on the fact of what, or his judgment. But what I think it has is that recovery comes in harmony with the Word of God. Because the two need to be aligned. You know, we can't be Christians and just say the Word of God doesn't apply. You know, we can't compartmentalize that so much. The other thing I think is really important in normalisation is compartmentalisation, where people say, I can't help worry. I say, okay. I had a lady say to me, well, I was born a worrier. And I said, well, is that 2 days after you're born or 5 days? How long? So what I get people to do is worry for a quarter of an hour in the morning and a quarter of an hour at night and enjoy their day. Because you know what, we need release. And there are times where we've got to give our mind that release. So laughter is really important. You know, of giving people a bit of a break. So during the summer when Cafe Care was a meeting, we got some people that went down the beach. You know what, we got to know them in a different way. It's really important that we normalise people as much as we can.
I guess the aircon should be on. Is everybody hot? Should be on. I guess you covered it a little bit, but then what is not helpful? So what should we not do? If we tell them what to do?
Yeah, and pretend that you know it all.
Pretend that you know it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yell at them, get angry with them, you shouldn't feel like that. You know, what are you doing? You know, you can control that. What is wrong? You know, get a life. I've heard people say that. You know, you need
Just
to be
get
on
over
your
it.
knees.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, doesn't help.
Anything else?
We all know the answer, like what we don't want people to do to us, what we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, that's true.
You know? Yeah. So using guilt, threat, spiritualizing things.
On your microphone, sorry, Jimmy. You know, you have to go microphone.
Yeah, just you know, things like you know, putting guilt trips. You know, one father of 5, now he's 5. He was suicidal. Went to the beach with a knife, wanted to kill himself. And then I knew him personally, and we went everywhere to look for him. And then when the police found him, he gave himself up to the police. And the police said, "You have 5 kids. Why do you want to kill yourself?" So you know, it's like you're saying, you know, they're better off without me. You know, so the thinking is just what, you know. So one of the things we should be saying is, you got all these kids that rely on you. You shouldn't be doing this. It's putting more guilt on them, putting more pressure. And sometimes we do it. I do it. You know, we all do it. But we need to realize what's better. That's why when you help someone, you need to learn some skills. Any one of us can learn it. You know. So if we really have the heart, we can use our head to learn. Okay. And just not be dismissive and not blaming.
Okay. Just to be more specific, if we have women spouses who are going through mental illness, anything specific for them to help their partners or husbands going through it? because you're living with them every day, and it can be hard to not maybe say some of those things, or at least feel some of those things that you said.
I think one of the things is that you need to see the people separately. You need to find out where their heart is for their partner. You need to find out where their relationship is with God, with their partner.
Sorry, Brendan, how about for the speaking directly to the partners? So if the women here have a partner, what would you say to them to help support their partner?
They need support from somebody, either a GP, a counsellor, a psychologist, or whatnot, but they also need friends. And the way that we would talk to them was to not diminish the person. Every time we put somebody down, it is destructive to their mental health. Every time. So when they can't do anything, or when they are disempowered, we say, look, yeah, it's really good you tried. You know, encouragement and praise and reinforcement and thank you is what we don't do a lot of.
They need that more, even
that's
more
right,
so.
yeah. And you know, that is, you know, dependent on whether they have a diagnosis or whatever. But, you know, we can only give out of our capacity that God gives us. So our relationship with God to help us communicate with our partner who may not understand or who may be going through something, we really need to know where we stand with God so that we can have that empowerment. Because if we don't pray for wisdom, our mouths can shoot off before we think.
In Singapore, we've got how many are you from Singapore? HDB, you know HDB, Housing Development Board. We all kind of joke, and sometimes people say it's high diving board. What basically do is people in high rise, they jump off. And the reason why they jump off, they could be spouses who have husbands or wives. Usually it's the wives who jump because their husbands have mental illness and they can't cope. You know, or daughters of aged parents who have to care for them and they jump off. So what happens with people who are partners is that you get personally more affected than helping a stranger. And so it's much harder. And it's like, you know, the person's drowning and you got to go and rescue them, but you get hit along the way and you get pulled into the water and you drown. You drown too. And so this is what happened to those people. So what's important is a life jacket. So if you want to help your partners, you've got to have a life jacket. What's a life jacket? What do you think it is? You know, it is counseling support for yourself. It is mentoring support for yourself. It is pastorally support. It is just support for you so that you don't drown too. So you could be helping there, and then you got to see someone else and get help before you drown too. So it's important to get help for yourself. Care for the carer, I always say.
Yeah. And then getting back to teenagers, how can we tell the difference between normal adolescent hormones and emotion use and a real problem? And how can we get them help?
Yeah, so when we were talking about adolescence, I could hear like a lot of mums with teens going, that's totally my child. You know, they're emotionally labile, they sleep a lot, they eat a lot, or they don't eat, they isolate themselves in their room. It can be difficult as a parent, and because this is a time when teenagers want to be independent, and so they may not talk to you as much about things, and that reduction in communication then leads on to lots of assumptions, and then those assumptions lead on to misunderstandings, and it drives a wedge into relationships. It's all very fun. It's all very fun. But no, it can be a very hard time for both teenagers and their parents. Look, this is not for all. Some families can get through and breeze through the adolescent years really well because there's lots of open communication, but some don't. And this is where having a village is actually crucial. Use those leaders at youth. Use other family members like that cool aunt or the older cousin, mentors that they may have. As long as they have someone who's older and they feel comfortable enough to talk about things with, then that's the beginning. So how much of it would be a typical teenager and how much of it could be possible depression or anxiety. For me, there are certain things that would just make me prick my ears up a little bit. If they stopped hanging out with their friends, if they stopped doing things that they loved, like dancing or music or games, if there were frequent drastic mood swings, or this drastic decline in school, these things would certainly make me just a little bit more suspicious. It wouldn't be diagnostic, so I wouldn't hear that and go, yep, definitely, you've got depression. So don't freak out if you go, oh, that's my kid. But it certainly would just signal that need to explore it a little bit more. So how do we help them if we're concerned? This is hard. I always encourage having an open conversation with them. Something along the lines of, oh, I've noticed you haven't gone out with your friends for a while and you've been looking a little bit sad. Is it something we can talk about? Don't get me wrong, I don't have these rose-coloured glasses on. I know that this is not a foolproof way. But you're opening the door for them, and it's definitely a beginning. They may not open up to you straight away, but they'll remember it, and they'll come back to you when they are ready to talk about it. And there are a number of ways to get help if that's something that you both decide is needed. At schools, there are school counsellors. Nowadays, there are a lot of school psychologists as well, so psychologists that come to the school particular days of the week for these things. Headspace, which the number was flashed up there briefly, that's an organisation that provides mental health support for teenagers, so that's anyone from 12 up to 25. And also your GP. If in doubt, go see your GP. They would certainly have a number of resources that could point you in the right direction.
With teenagers, not just with teenagers, with anyone that you think you're pretty sure is going through something, some sort of mental illness, but doesn't want to get help, what would you do? What is available to us, short of, you don't want to be pushing them into a car to go see somebody. What is available if they don't want to get help? What do you do?
I think if the mountain doesn't go to the hamlet, you go to the mountain. Okay, so you go to their home, you sit down, you have a meal, you get to know the family.
You contact
how
someone
they
to come in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You go and you get to know the tone of the family. I always ask who wears the pants in the family, and sometimes it's the woman and sometimes it's the man. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the power in that family, the power base. And sometimes the kids aren't happy with the power base. I also go to schools, and I can see the child in the school, but I always want to go home and have a meal with them and get to know the parents, because it's not that the parents are the problem, it is what boundaries have they set, if any. How do they treat them? How do they talk to them? What is their language? Do they put the kids down? What is the process with iPads and iPods? Okay, I have to say, I'm like super nanny. So when I go in, all the iPads and all the iPods go into a plastic bag until I'm out of the house, okay? Because I'm there to talk to you. We've got to establish boundaries, because we think if we let the kids do what they want, they'll be all right. But that's not the way Scripture talks. Scripture says that we need to have boundaries, that there need to be consequences, and they need to be in balance. People see teenage counselling as something that's really hard to do. But I think in all stages of life, we just need to get in their same headspace. We need to get to their level. And if that means sitting on the floor and playing a board game with them, or going into their room and sitting on a bunch of pillows and just getting to know them, that point of connection is really important.
So one method is we contact somebody, a professional, to come into the home. If we can't get them, refer to somebody else. What's another? If there are some extreme cases where you need to get help.
depends how serious it is. Like, if it's not very serious, but they don't want to see anyone, you could actually encourage them to go online and give them the proper contact websites. We've got some available, given to you. But really, some teenagers like that, they want to go into it themselves and read for themselves. Anxiety online, I think it's called something else now. It's called anxiety line, where they could actually get a therapy-assisted program. They could actually, for a small fee, you can get a therapist helping them through online. So there are lots of available websites these days. Ask them to, have a look, or you could even print out some and give it to them and let them read for themselves. But if it's very serious, there's suicide involved, and you've got to call the crisis team to come and talk to them.
Where's this crisis team from? How will you contact them?
There are numbers you can call. Every region has a number. So
do you dial 000 first, or
you can dial 000, and the police can actually get some. Usually they get an ambulance, or the police will come along as well. But the team will be there to support. So there's specific numbers for each region, but you can call 000 also to get a faster response.
I think you've got to be very alert to the symptoms that the teenager is showing. Mums and dads know their kids fairly well, and when the behaviour is asymptomatic and we're not sure what's going on, it's really important that we know our ground and we know that the symptoms that they're showing, and that we react from that point of view. We can't be people who are unsafe, and we can't be parents who are safe. I've had a girl who's been locked in her room for 3.5 years. She's anorexic, so it's self-isolated, and she managed to get out of her room last week for the first time for 3 years. She's 37 kilos, and I've been going there almost every 2 weeks for 3 years. The thing is that we give gentle hope, gentle encouragement and prayer. And that's one thing that I think is really important with people that you're seeing that are struggling. Your most effective tool always is prayer. Always. Always. There is nothing in this world that is more powerful than that. But that means your relationship with God has got to be such that you know that power within you. And that's really nice.
Look,
Can I say also doctors do pay home visits? Now there's services available.
There's no services.
And sometimes they would rather see a doctor for physical symptoms, but that could lead them to mental health services available.
Just as a last question for now, can you talk a little bit about self-care? There's self-care that's important for the person going through mental illness, but also self-care for carers or people looking after or living with individuals experiencing that.
So you're saying that when you want to care for someone, you got to be strong enough, huh? It's like saving a drowning person, yeah. If you're not strong enough, you drown too, and we've seen that happen recently. So it is really about getting, with the airplane, the oxygen needs to be given to who first? The parent or the child? Yeah, why is that? The parent, the stronger one. Yet, so the helpers, we as carers need to actually make sure that we have a care system, a way of supporting ourselves in caring before we want to try to help other people, because then we can go under. So we need that oxygen first, and then we can help the person to get the oxygen they need, which is the support.
So I guess, it's pretty much, as you said, for when we were talking about spouses or parents, just needing to make sure that you're covered as well, and that you actually need counselling also. Yeah.
And I think it's important for women not to listen too much to their feelings as much as to try and compartmentalise. This is what I feel, but this is what I know, and this is how I can get there. When we have things that come into our head, if they're negative and they're going to pull us down, at that point we have the ability to reject it. We don't have to be defined by the negatives. If we can think negatively, we can also think positively from the Word of God, not just positive. But, we've got to watch what we allow ourselves to think about, because that can define us. And that then becomes your truth. But the truth is a lie because it's based on a negative that you first had in the first place. So my part of self-care is watch what you think about. You know, the Word of God says where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So what we spend most of our time doing can be the dominant factor in our life. And for us women, we can feel rejected, we can feel sad. But when we're told that we're valued, then we suddenly say, oh, I'm not rejected, I'm all right. You know what I mean? Like, we are so fickle sometimes. But the Word of God is not. That's the beautiful part. And so to get enough healthy exercise and to eat a good diet is really important. And, you know, we need more teaching in our church about keeping fit. You know, we need to look after the soul, we look after the food, but we need a lot more about looking after our health. And that part of self-care is hugely important because God wants us to be the best for Him. Yeah?
So can I just ask, people, you have to ask yourself right now, how am I caring for myself? Do I have a system of caring for myself? If your answer is no, then how are you going to care for someone? You know what I mean? Like, if you really want to care for someone, then you've got to have a system of caring for yourself. Start with yourself first, and then you'll be more equipped to help someone else. And even like getting a good doctor, counselor, pastor, just having, you can do things like learning how to do meditation now. We're talking about being able to relax and calm your mind down, being able to talk, have a good positive way of talking to yourself. These are things you can learn from a counselor. And also eating habits, we talked a bit earlier. Do you have friends or life groups to support? Are you isolated or are you connected? And use of connection. Be interested in your own lifestyle changes that will help you go a long way in terms of your health. And have crisis numbers available so that you can always call Lifeline or Beyond Blue just to talk to someone there, just for help yourself, to be able to help yourself before you help others.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you.